Hi. Hello. Hi, we're gonna start in just a sec, but welcome to an episode of The Lunch Zone. I think I need to turn down the game sounds a little bit. They're kind of, at least they're loud in my ears. I assume they're probably a little loud in yours. Go ahead and turn those down just a little bit more. All right. So, welcome to The Lunch Zone. This is a show where we have different people on every week playing different games, and we're just having fun around lunchtime. It's a good time, and we're glad that you could join us. I'm Eric Kirsting. I'm your host. I think I'm the only one here right now, but I think some people will be joining us in the Discord chat in just a moment. But even if they don't, we're still gonna have a great time. And so today we're gonna be playing the video game Black Mesa. Now, this is a game that's near and dear to my heart because I love the Half-Life series. I love Half-Life 1 and 2, and I'm a Valve stan. I'm just gonna admit it. I love all the Valve games. I'll double check that this is up online just to make sure, but we'll have that weird trippy thing right where I see myself. We'll double check on that just to make sure that we're live. Everything's working just all right. It is all right. Good to go. But I'm a Valve stan through and through. I love the Half-Life games. I love the Portal games. I even played Dota. I don't care for Left 4 Dead, so I guess not every Valve game floats my boat. But Black Mesa, if you are unaware, you out in the ether, is it is a remake of Half-Life 1 in the engine of Half-Life 2. And it was entirely fan made. It was like sanctioned by Valve. Like they were like, this is a good idea. Keep going, right? As Valve often does if they have a pretty good relationship with the modding community, which is something I think we'll talk about quite a bit today. But I want to just jump in and play some Black Mesa with you. This game has a super memorable and beautiful opening sequence, which I think really sets the tone. So let's go ahead and we'll start right there at Chapter 1. In the Half-Life games, you play as theoretical physicist Gordon Freeman. And I'm somewhat thing of an academic myself, so I can maybe identify with good old Gordon. I say I'm gonna turn up the audio. Tad. We'll go up to 20. All right. So got the start here. We're Gordon Freeman. We start the game in a train. In the Black Mesa Research Facility in Black Mesa, New Mexico.
Good morning.
I gotta kind of
to
fix
the
my
Black
mic.
Mesa Transit System. This automated train is
Kind of got this like
provided for the
very
security
like
and
military-industrial
convenience of the Black
complex
Mesa Research Facility
kind of vibe to it.
personnel.
But you can already see if you've played the original Half-Life 1 is that this is like a
is
significant
8:47 a.m.
like improvement, or not improvement, but this is a significant like graphical upgrade from the original Half-Life game.
Degrees, with an estimated high of 105.
Please look down there. The other people on trains kind of
Mesa
doing their work.
compound is maintained at a pleasant 68 degrees at all times.
Need to turn down the. Sorry, keep bugging you guys with the settings. I just want to turn up the mouse sensitivity just a tad to like that should be good. That's better. All right. I tend to play with very low sensitivities, but we're moving through. Got that new advanced source lighting system. We got a loading screen. Why do they use Lambda for an A? Luke asks. That's a good question. So the Lambda symbol is like the Half-Life symbol, and so I think they use the Lambda for the A for that reason. Like it's kind of like, it's like the mushroom in Mario or the Triforce in Zelda. So it's like, I'm not exactly sure actually. I'm a big Half-Life fan, but I don't actually know what the lambda means out of the context of Half-Life. I only know about it because of its relationship to Half-Life. I know it's like a Greek letter, but I don't know what it means in Greek. If you know, Luke, please let me know. We got
Area 9 and board a high security train.
But of course, this this intro is like it's kind of it's probably not very novel in 2020, but when Half-Life 1 originally came out, this was like a very like interesting way for them to start the game. Like you're just in a tram, you just are being introduced to the world. Like, and really, Half-Life is the original Half-Life is one of the first FPS games that really tried to tell a story, right, a narrative. And this definitely was the first thing you see right away in the game, where you're like, yeah, this game is kind of telling a narrative.
No smoking, eating, or drinking are permitted within the Black Mesa transit system.
Ooh, is like the frame rate really bad for you guys, or is it okay? I just looked over at my my OBS and it doesn't seem to be happy right now. That's weird. I wonder why it's running this like that. Maybe it's just because Black Mesa's a pretty intensive game.
Until the train has come to a complete halt at the station platform. In the event of an emergency, passengers are to remain seated and await further instruction. If it is necessary to exit the train,
encoding overload. Consider turning down the video settings. Oh yeah, there is.
Stay away from electrified rails and
how would I?
to an emergency station until assistance
Dude, I might just have to roll with that. I didn't expect that. I don't have that as a problem normally. Maybe I'll turn down the video settings in the game. What are we at right now? We're on like the ultras. We'll turn things down to like medium. Hopefully that'll help. Come on, there we go. Hopefully that helps a little. Hey, Ludolog. Hope you're doing well. Does anyone in the chat, do you guys have experience playing the Half-Life games? You're entering into a big chamber. This thing's gonna like open up and let us in further. See, there's one of the... Not 1 minute of it, says Luke. Well, I mean, you're kind of in for a treat, because it's one of the best things ever made ever in any context. I kind of went really ham on the Half-Life this year because Half-Life Alyx came out in March, and that's my game of the year. I bought it on day one and I started playing it, and I loved that game. It was so good. And so I went back and I decided after I finished Alyx to replay all the Half-Life games. And I played Black Mesa instead of playing Half-Life 1. If any of you want to jump onto the Discord chat, you can totally come and join and talk to me there too. That's us, Gordon Freeman.
Hazard course Decathlon will commence this evening at 1900 hours in the Level 3 facility. The semifinals for
we're a PhD, MIT theoretical physicists. Oh, Gamer Anthony, I can't make you a mod right now, but I can do that in a little bit. I don't know why that happened. I'm sorry.
Hello, Eric.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
Our assignment is in the Anomalous Materials Laboratory. What is your experience, Thomas, with Half-Life?
Oh, very limited. Is this the original?
This is the remake of the original, fan remake.
I did play a bit of it. Yeah, I played through this stuff. This is, yeah, but I stopped. It was during that period of my life where I was Twitch, as I call them, kind of Twitch games, or fast reaction games. I was just starting to realize maybe I'd gotten too old for them. So there was this room I couldn't get through without dying, and then I think I set it down. I never picked it up.
Biotechnology or other high-tech disciplines.
I love the Half-Life games. They're maybe my favorite series, so I'm kind of excited to just play through. I've already beaten this game, but that was like 6 months ago. and right when COVID started. this was like my initial coping mechanism. Is I played Half-Life Alyx, like the VR game that came out this year. And then I played all the Half-Life games. That was like my April. But I'm a big Half-Life fan. I think that they're really well designed games. I think they're really fun. As I was telling Chad a little bit, the game opens with this really lengthy train sequence or tram sequence where you're just stuck in a tram and you just are kind of moving through the facility that you're ended up playing the entire game in. Or most of the game, I guess, not all of it. And it's like sets this up as like this kind of story-based game, right? Like as opposed to like most shooters, which are going to have you picking up a gun and firing it within the first couple seconds. Half-Life was novel, at least in 1998 when it came out, or 1997, in the sense that that wasn't what you did right away. Like the game got this poor guy. They're trying to get out. Oh, there's all these little stories throughout this entire thing. I think we just reached.
But yeah, I mean that was such a huge impression, and that's influenced so many games since then. You know, Fallout and stuff like that, where there's little vignettes that you're seeing all along the start of the game, especially.
Yeah, when I signed up for Lunch Zone yesterday, I didn't know what I would play, but I had just watched this documentary by this YouTube channel called NoClip, where they just detailed like the history of Half-Life basically, and that's kind of what got me like, maybe I'll play Black Mesa.
Looks like you're running late.
But I guess one of there was this what's it called? Side developer who was like contracted out to make like additional Half-Life. There were like other Half-Life expansions, right? And I guess one of their inspiration was like they saw like this one scientist locked out of his lab in the original game, and they're like, we're gonna make a game about that guy. Like, so that's how impressionable it was, like in those early years when it came out, right? Like these like that opening sequences.
Yeah.
That, like the people who were developing, the expansions were able to take inspiration from even like the little things that I take for granted now.
Yeah.
I will say, like, I think that I'm sure people have written about this, but there's like a lot of nostalgia, I think, locked in with like sound. And like when I play this, because I played all the Half-Life games multiple times, and like my ears are inundated with all the traditional Half-Life sounds. And it's like, oh man, like, like a little rush of nostalgia when you hear the footsteps or the little like the sound when someone presses a button or things like that.
So let me ask you this then, like, is there something about, and I'm probably going to misuse the term zeitgeist, but what you were just saying reminded me of the story that gets told about when D&D sort of began, that there were all these war gamers, right? And the war gamers are just, somehow that's part of the zeitgeist then. They're into this, and they're just so into it, and they're so into it that they want to zero in on something that the wargaming, the tabletop, the big wargaming kind of battles is not giving them, which is what is the story of that guy? What's the story of that particular warrior? Let's turn this in. Let's zero in on that one person, and build a game based on that. And D&D, in part at least, seems to come from that kind of impulse. And you just described something so similar, that people in a particular moment in the late 1990s in this kind of game got so into it they wanted to zero in on these little passing moments, right, and elaborate on them and develop them. Is that a fair parallel, do you think?
At least according to the documentary, which was with Randy Pickford, I can't remember his last name, who is the lead of Gearbox now. I think Gearbox makes the Borderlands games. So like, but according to him, yes, like that was like a huge part of it for him, and like the inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I think we're gonna start seeing, remakes, and like, especially ones like this, which this isn't exactly a one-to-one remake, but it's pretty close. I think that they illuminate like what is fun about like game design to some degree, because a lot of games don't hold up. Do you know what I mean? Like, you go back, especially because of graphics, right? Like graphics are like the first barrier to that, right? It's like if you're used to playing like 3D games like Assassin's Creed, lately, and then you go back to play like 1995 Tomb Raider, you're like, it's like hard to like be like, it's hard to find it. It can be hard for some people to find enjoyable. Just like how going back to watching like black and white film, some people just can't do it, right? Like
or comics, right? The golden age of comics, and people will go back and look and feel like the graphics and everything else is, crude or something compared to what they did in the 90s or 80s. But maybe that's just a kind of relatively temporary bias of people who are playing these games thinking they're in it for, let's say, the verisimilitude of advanced graphics at any given moment. But underneath that, the engagement is much more about the narrative and personality and gameplay, which you come to appreciate isn't really dependent upon these mind-blowing graphics at all.
Yeah. Gamer Anthro says, and we see more and more because game design tools are becoming more accessible and classes and programs to learn are also becoming more common. Luke notes the lower points of entry, and Ludolog is talking about teaching Watchmen, and the art always makes them wince. So there's like kind of a timeless quality, right? I think certain games, right, I think they access that timelessness more easily than others. I think there's a wide variety of reasons for that, right? It's not like you could write a book on that, Pac-Man, right, has a timelessness to it. You don't need to upgrade the graphics or anything to enjoy Pac-Man because of like what the game kind of is.
Right.
And with Half-Life, I think part of it is the story, and I think another part of it is like the level design and like the way you kind of move through the world and the way the world's been kind of crafted. Like it just holds up because like it Gamer Anther says, proved that people laughed at the graphics and the cartoony aesthetic when it first launched, but then we saw visuals matter much less to immersion than previously believed. That's a great example because like to me when I play WoW, I'm like, I don't feel very like in control of my character, right? In this sense, we were actually talking about it yesterday because we played Fall Guys on the Arena, which is this new game where you basically control a bean with arms, like it's little stubby arms, and you're like really slow and meandering and waddle everywhere basically. And we were talking about like the difference between that and like a Mirror's Edge, but the game where like it's all about parkour, right? And this really elegant movement. And it's funny because the game with the crummy movement actually kind of feels better because of the context, right, of the game.
Right. Well, it makes me think too about our discussion about parallax, right? Like, we need some handy scheme, conceptual spectrum where at one end are games that strive for a kind of abstract quality, which is never really as abstract as it tries to be, Pac-Man or Parallax or something like that. And at the other end are these games that are striving for some kind of verisimilitude, which is never as real as it pretends to be. But yet that spectrum seems to matter in terms of what, how likely a game is to hold up, or what our engagement with it can be. Our engagement with Pac-Man now can be pretty straightforward and comparable to what it was in 1975, whereas our engagement with something like this, there is an inescapably nostalgic or retro quality to it, right? Even if we're fond of it, even if we say it holds up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things that I think they expanded on it in this remake, but that I think is always like really good about the opening of this game is like fundamentally this is like almost like a horror game. Hey, Janelle, come join us on chat, by the way, on voice chat if you want.
Oh, cool.
But one of the things that I think that holds up well, and I think it really sets up like kind of this great horror movie kind of vibe, is that you walk through the entire facility, and as we're about to see, we're about to have like the inciting event of the story, right? Where where there's the experiment goes wrong, the aliens from the other world are invading Earth, right? Like all this bad stuff, right? And this like normal day where these guys are like over here talking about their PhDs and like how they're not satisfied with the work they're doing, they're like all gonna die, or they're like in these various states of chaos as we move back through the environment we just like walked through that was tranquil in this state of chaos. Like it's really it's good. I love that this kind of opening. That's one of the reasons why I thought this wouldn't be so bad, is because like this game's got a stellar start.
I'm afraid we'll be
Lucas telling us to.
analysis procedure today. Yes, but
I don't think it's spoilers if I'm telling you the premise of the game.
Also, it's 20 years old, so it's hilarious.
Now, as long as we follow standard insertion procedures.
Yeah, I completely agree, Stuart. I always think of vending machines when I see that scene.
The possibility of a resonance cascade scenario is extremely unlikely.
I think one thing we could probably spend like the next 30 minutes if we wanted to talking about, but I think is really interesting here, and it's really interesting to me, particularly as a scholar. Like if I were to write on this game, this is probably what I would focus on. This game is a remake of the original Half-Life game. It was originally started purely as like a mod for Half-Life 2, like using the source engine to like port Half-Life 1 over to like this new engine, right? And like kind of engage with it on that matter. And it evolved into like a fully featured game, like $20, that it was sanctioned by Valve, like the creators of Half-Life. They're like, yeah, you can just basically remake our game if you want to, like fans, and you can monetize it. That's okay. And I find that relationship to be really interesting. And I think a great question to have is like, why does the Half-Life franchise cultivate this modding culture around it so much more than most other games? Because Counter-Strike is like, you know, now one of Valve's big cash cows. It's like their big shooter esport was a mod for the original Half-Life. You know, Portal was made using the tools of Half-Life. Gary's mod, you know, which I know Janelle really likes, is made from the tools of Half-Life, right? People love to take the tools of the Half-Life games and apply them to other things. And I'm kind of curious why we think that might be. Like, in relation, like, why this and not something else ends up, gaining such attention. Question.
Yeah. I'm hopeful that chat will help us understand, bring some illumination.
So here we're doing the test. Beginner's Guide, Stanley's Parable, yeah, all those made with the tools from Half-Life.
Stage 2 emitters activating now.
Gordon, we cannot predict how long the system can operate at this level, nor how long the reading will take. Please.
This is like the nexus of the story right here. I love how in this scene it's all so, everything's so dry. Like it's just like they're reciting percentages and everything like that. I don't know, for some reason it's kind of comforting almost.
So I can attempt I can take a cynical stab at an answer to your question.
Yeah, do it.
You know, that cultural products, you know, movies, games, novels, etc., that spawn this kind of fandom. You know, Lord of the Rings might be one. You know, one way, perhaps, I don't know how, I don't write about this stuff, I've studied this stuff, I have no idea what it's with water at all, but it seems to me that one way of making sense of it is that it's because of a fit that's found between a particular community and its habitus, its disposition toward the world, and seeing that expressed in this cultural product, you know, almost seamlessly, almost sort of in a well-crafted way, where everything seems to fit together, and it seems to be a confirmation of a particular way of thinking about the world. I mean, The Matrix was kind of like that too, as a film when it first came out. So, you know, along those lines is maybe this is where the cynicism comes in, is the suggestion that, you know, a group, usually a, you know, pretty privileged group, in a kind of self-indulgent way, now and then is able to see itself through some kind of cultural product. And then in the wake of that, you see this enormous investment of creative energy into it to sort of continue to elaborate on this self-confirming, group-confirming kind of object, or worldview confirming kind of object. I don't know. It's just sort of off the top of my head, but I'm curious whether that resonates for anybody.
I think that resonates in part for me, because I think it's I'm taking the cultural product more than right now, at least in this first conceptualization, is more as a text, right? As something someone can engage with and identify with, or reject, right? Or confirm the worldview of. And in that sense, I think there's a lot of ways in which I think Half-Life engages with probably kind of a straight white male gamer kind of idea of the world,
and anti-institutional. Let me just add.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anti-institutional in some ways and pro-institution in others, which is kind of interesting. And so because the main character, right, is it's easy to graph yourself on, right, because they don't talk a lot, which is different than Doom Guy or Duke Nukem, which were other big shooters in this time, right, who were more hyper masculine womanizers, but instead you're kind of this computer geek kind of character, at least based on what other people are telling you, right? You're a theoretical physicist, but also the world, right, is this complex kind of webbing of as kind of institutional conspiracies, right? And the primary enemies of the game, right, are not just the aliens, which are cool, I guess, but also the government, right? Because the government's trying to keep a hush-hush, right? That's a big part of the plot of this game, right? Is the government's going to kill all the scientists so they can't tell anyone about it. And so in that way, I think it does promote that kind of conspiratorial kind of mindset of the individual versus the institution, for sure.
Yeah, the X-Files,
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Definitely. I think it hits the same zeitgeist as X-Files does. I think that poor guy. Turn on our flashlight. Keep going here. Pick up stuff. The game's kind of. This is the actual tutorial moment right here, where it's they're kind of teaching us oh yeah, okay, throw the object like this, do that. Alright, Gamer Anthro's getting back to work. See ya! I'm waiting for the lightning reveal, says Luke. I don't know what that exactly is referring to. I think another reason why the game kind of picks that up is also because of the disposition of the creators of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So Valve as creators, they are those guys, right? In some degree, Gabe Newell, right, got cut his what is that expression,
cut his teeth?
Cut his teeth, right, at Microsoft, working on creating OS systems, right? And then he decided he wanted to make games. And so because of the collective background, almost all and because of the background at the time of Doom, right, which was freeware, right, which was often modded, right, and kind of engage had that kind of thing going for it. It is famous for that kind of attitude with the Quake series, right? Ooh, ouch. In fact, this game was made using the Quake engine, if I recall correctly. But there was a high willingness from Valve to give the tools of creation to the players, right? And I think that when you see a company do that, right, and a company like Valve, which made a game that you might really appreciate, or something that already confirms with a lot of your worldview, and you see them sharing those tools, maybe you're more willing to kind of use them, right? And that becomes your way. And now they have such a history of working with modders, right? They hire modders often, you know what I mean? Which was something that I covered, I think, in that paper I wrote for you last semester.
Yeah.
But I think like that, like that's another way that, you know what I mean? Like it's always, I guess it's always more than one thing, right? But it's like it cultivates that cultural product disposition towards like creation and stuff, but it also kind of as a company culture, right? They kind of encourage that a lot more than many other companies, like, right?
Yeah.
I don't know of anyone like really modding seriously like Assassin's Creed or something, because Ubisoft probably doesn't cultivate, right, a culture around their games that does that.
Right. But they Valve comes to represent a kind of ideal type for gamers, you know, where it's supposed to be like this, and so this is what they imagine game companies are when in fact they're an outlier instead. It becomes a kind of paradigm.
This is one of the most terrifying moments of the game. It's the elevator falls and all these people die. But then that lets me progress, I guess, and I'm the hero. So PhD simulated in Ludolog. Note the portal connections, and Ludolog says the opposite of Stanley Kubrick, who burned spaceship models in 2001 so that no one could reuse them. Yeah, it is kind of a different kind of mode towards creativity. Like some people, like the Kubricks of the world, they did I miss the crowbar, or did I just not get it yet? Because like the crowbar is like the iconic moment in this game. Yeah, I don't have a crowbar. Maybe I'll get it in a moment. There's no, you can't not get the crowbar. I just must not have happened yet. At least we got the guard here who's helping us shoot things.
Right, isn't it sticking out of somebody or something like that? I can't remember where you get the crowbar.
I think that might be right. I'm just gonna keep moving forward. Sorry, guard guy. Here's like this is like good. This is like the ethos right here. Is like the first, like instead of giving you the crowbar or gun, the first thing you do is you have a flare. Wait, why didn't it turn on? There we go. That you use to turn on, like to set the zombies on fire, right? Like that kind of creative use of the. You're supposed to be able to like set. Oh yeah, right. If you throw it there, yeah, you can like kind of show you like you're a scientist, right? You're gonna use a flare to solve the problem, right? Instead of using a gun, even though eventually they're just gonna give you a gun, and you're just gonna spend most of the game shooting stuff. Yeah. So crowbar is the only weapon I use in the Bioshock games. This is 10 out of 10 spooky. Yeah. This is like I think it's worth noting, like even though we're playing Black Mesa, the fan-made mod. Like, I think it's worth asking, like, what was it like to play this a game like when it came out? Like, this is spooky as fuck, you know.
It really was. I played it when it came out for sure. Yeah.
It's worth noting, like I kind of skipped some of the early scenes, but there's a great early scene here where this guy who actually died in the toilet, guard, shoot that guy. But he actually asked you for toilet paper, and you can go and you can take it and put it into his thing. And then you find him dead later on. Like, it's gotta, like, you can interact with almost everybody, and then they all have like their own unique stories. Let's take our flare here. Let's get out. We gotta figure out where we're going. See you later. 1 + 2 = 3 mechanics are the quickest way to my heart. I think, like, could you elaborate on that a little bit more, Janelle? Here we see like that. We missed it, but this guy like throws like one of the things they were definitely proud about was kind of like the physics of the game. So like a lot of the early game is like giving you objects to throw or move around, you know, or showing the enemies throwing and moving around the objects. They were obviously really proud of that. Oh, here we are. This is how you get the crowbar. You have to open it and then start beating up the zombies. And here we have it. Ati says I have to get out. I have to head out. All right. Well, thanks. Yeah, I pray you're all right, friend.
Yeah. Fingers crossed for you, Ati.
Yeah, I love this kind of spooky vibe. And now we have a crowbar, and that's like the whole symbol of the game, which is great, right? And that, I think the crowbar goes a long way to that cultural kind of discussion that you were describing, right? Because what does a crowbar represent, right? It's at once it's kind of a blue collar kind of implement, but it is also kind of a right. It's like something that indicates like science building, right? Creation or tearing down, right? It's like,
well, yeah, absolutely, tearing, destruction, and a kind of, but also a kind of gross motor problem solving, right? Like one thing we've talked about a lot on some of these streams where games come up that talk about masculinity is how in the post-war United States there was this kind of engineering culture which was celebratory of of a masculinity that was about the fine skills, the radio operator, you know, the technician. That was a kind of new fine motor skill kind of masculinity, as opposed to the kind of gross motor skill masculinity of high industrialization and agricultural kind of context and work and masculinity associated with that. So I think from the certainly beginning, even before the 80s, but especially blossoming in the 90s and through today, is you see it in these video games, is this kind of, no, the way to solve the real problems, the high stakes problems, is to have the knowledge and the skill to shoot things, to beat things, to show you know how to use an iron tool that's reliable, that isn't complex, that isn't about your knowledge of some complex system. That's what it says to me. Yeah, it's a lever. Yeah.
It's that kind of Mission Impossible Tom Cruise kind of attitude, right? Which is that, like, yes, these are like great problems of like thermonuclear war or whatever, you know, but also all we need is like the right person in the right place. Like, and that's that's literally what the G-Man, right, a character in this game, tells you at the think of the start of Half-Life 2, right? Which is the right man in the wrong place can make like all the difference, right? So that's like baked into the ethos of the game.
Yeah. Yeah, and to the extent that, you know, with the decline of American manufacturing and, you know, some part of the story of American politics of the last 50 years is, you know, like in Hillbilly Elegy and the like, a whole bunch of people feeling, white males feeling left behind, that what they value, what their skills are, don't matter. You know, so many of these games seem to be about exploring, you know, wow, you know, what is it about those kinds of skills that makes them powerful? What kinds of problems do they solve?
Yeah, and I think it also has to do with narrative, right? And the way like stories generally function, right? Stories tend to be about individuals, and so, sorry, I had to kill a zombie. Like a story, like, right, it's easier to tell a story where you're Gordon Freeman, this theoretical physicist who solves all the problems, right, the right man in the wrong place. It's a lot easier to tell that story than to like tell the story of like, I don't know, a conspiracy without the individual like kind of rising up over it.
Right. Yeah.
All right, so
how would you compare it to the Halo kind of narrative?
It's a little nicer I think it's a little better than the Halo narrative. Better is the relative term. By better, what I mean is it's less falls into those pitfalls. Like the Halo narrative is really, really the Ubermensch, and I think this is, we were saying, this is also Ubermenschy, like especially Half-Life 1 more than Half-Life 2, because Half-Life 1, like it really is like by the end of the game, like you've got like the super soldiers who are like coming to kill you, are like, oh shit, it's Gordon Freeman, like that's like a literal line. Oh god, this doesn't explode. That's hazardous material. So like you do have that a little bit, but in Half-Life 2 and in Half-Life Alyx, which is part of the reason why I was considering writing a paper on Half-Life Alyx as like a feminist experience, because it does turn a lot of that on its head. Like you need those other people in both Half-Life 2 and in Half-Life Alyx to like get anywhere, to get things done. Like they're always helping you, right, guiding you, you know, as opposed to this game where like you're kind of this, oh geez,
lone.
This kind of, this lone fighter who ends up like, you know, kind of saving the day all on their own. Like the only real voice, Like compare like I suppose Half-Life has or Halo has that to a lesser degree, but I feel like I don't know, based on just my knowledge of the Halo lore and just the way Halo functions, is it's like Halo is very much like you are like a super soldier in a super suit who is trained for like to enact violence. Whereas in this game, Gordon Freeman is also, yes, he has to enact violence quite often, but you also have to do a lot of problem solving that's like puzzle based.
Yeah. Yeah, and Stuart's right. Master Chief. I mean, just a little redundant, in its own thing, and the kind, and everything that implies. Yeah, exactly. So as compared to how you were characterizing it before for this one, in Halo, it is the right person in the right place, right? As how did you put it for Gordon Freeman instead? Gordon is the
right person in the wrong place.
Yeah, and Master Chief is the right person in the right place, in a way.
Oh, I died. It's okay. I took a lot of. One of the things is like you got some. Can I pick that up? Oh, there we go. Okay, that's good. I'll hit quick save it there. One of the things, like if we're talking about older game design, like you actually have like a health, like you see like there's a number that corresponds to my health, and like it doesn't like you don't have like a shield that like recharges or anything. Like you have to go find health. It's interesting because it's interesting how relics of game design can come to be like signifiers of the game itself. So Half-Life Alyx has the same function of like you have a health bar like that doesn't recharge. Whereas most shooters now are like your health is going to recharge over time, or you have like a shield, right? Health packs are like becoming like more and more not almost obtuse or something like you could describe them as. Oh cool, we picked up a grenade. They're becoming like less and less like what we expect kind of from like contemporary game design, but the Half-Life series will probably always have to do that, right? Oh shoot! Oh wait, which one ate me? Darn it! That was funny. When I play the wrong player in the wrong place. Like for me, like I do think like a person has to have like some pretty intense feelings of connection or identification with a piece of media, right? Because like this, I mean, and I know that they ended up selling it, like right, like this is a product that is sold, like right, like I paid $20 for this or whatever, but they initially just started this project just because they love Half-Life and they wanted to see it remade in like a new way. Like how much connection does a person have to have with a piece of media, right? In order to feel compelled to do that, right? Like to want to like remake a game, right, which has ostensibly no real benefit to them other than the pleasure of the creative act. I find that interesting. I find like modding in general to be like I hesitate to like use this particular, but it's like kind of like there's a purity to it in a sense, which of course is very complicated by all the other things that are kind of going on to it but it's like it is game design like in one way like very focused just on the idea of playing the game, right, and the joy of whatever that game represents,
right? Yeah.
Let's see. PhD Simulator says she agrees with me. I was actually going to say the death screen was pretty underwhelming in the age of like the snuff effect scenes in like TR. Yeah. And the Tomb Raider scenes where death scenes are like super graphic and totally sensationalized. Oh, we need to turn on the electricity, otherwise this thing's not going to work. Like this is what I'm talking about. Like the kind of game design of Valve is like I think they said like for every like they have a certain number of clicks or actions they want a player to be doing like every like 30 minutes, right? And so like if it was all action scenes, like that would be bad. And so like when they design their games, they like purposely will have like section where like you're clicking a lot, you're like you're doing a lot of actions, you're doing action sequences, and then they'll throw in like, okay, now you're gonna have to climb through a vent and turn on the electricity and solve this short little puzzle.
Well, it's that poetic pacing, right? Like Roman Jakobson would say, right? The right mixture of these different rhythms. It's like it's the rhythm of a essentially, like a poem.
And the game like
piece of music.
and here the game like rewards you a little bit, right? But give it like, you come in to turn on the electricity, but you also get some grenades and you get some health, right? Like, that's kind of classic Valve design. And
it's a respite,
Mm-hmm. Before, this is probably the first true action scene is like this part. Now I actually I was considering like, should I speedrun this game? So I actually watched this section and the speedrunners will just jump down, but we won't do that. So here's like the first like action sequence of the game where like head crabs just keep falling and like attacking you.
Oh, I remember this. Yeah.
What's interesting about the head crabs is that they're actually like easier to kill with the crowbar than they are with the handgun.
Completely agree. I was so surprised at that, when I was playing the game.
Because it takes two. It's like, as with most things in life, one crowbar will kill it, but it'll take two handguns. That's how I think of force. I guess these things are kind of small. You can imagine a bludgeoning weapon being perhaps more effective than a piercing one. But now I'm thinking, but I love that. Like, look at them falling. Like, I don't know. This is like, to me, this is like beautiful in its own way. Like great, just like a great way to like design a scene, right? And that's what a lot of Half-Life is. It's like, it's not just like they try to like really vary things. So it'll be like, all right, now you're like coming down this thing, and like things are falling on top of you, and you're trying to figure it out all at once. Ludolog says is an HVAC minigame. I totally agree with you, Luke, by the way, about finding like corners, ledges, and bullet and things that you get trapped in. That happens to me like all the time.
Oh, and Morrowind was awful for that.
They didn't test
Morrowind. I didn't finish Morrowind, and I am a huge Elder Scrolls fan, and I didn't finish Morrowind because of just how, well, it was also so dark and murky as a game, but that's a whole other issue.
WSD, what always stuck? Damn it. That's funny. I've never heard that before. But, so I guess, a question to ask is like, when we're thinking about remakes, there's like a couple of different like ways one can go about doing like a remake, right? Like, one could, one could do like a one-for-one remake, right? Where it's like you're trying to make the game exactly how it is, but you've just like changed, like made the graphics better. And then there's also like kind of a one-for-one remake that's even like more extreme, right? Which is like exactly how it was, period. Like, because which isn't exactly what WoW Classic was, but like that was like the ethos that I keep using ethos. That's the character. Well, he will use the actual American word for it. American. But that's like, right, that's the character of like the WoW Classic, right? It's like exactly how you remember it in 2004 or 2005, right? And then you could start tweaking things, start changing things. And this game has quite a bit of tweaks, right? The whole last third of the game, which takes place on this weird alien planet called Zen, they completely like redid. Like, because that part is like everyone's least favorite part about Half-Life anyways. And I think that in some ways they had more freedom to do that because they weren't the creators of the game, right? They are not beholden to like fan expectations as much, right? They're beholden to their own expectations of like, what do we want to see this game be, and become?
Yeah, what's at stake for them is different.
Yeah,
when they undertake that.
And then you have some remakes which are like, I think like some of the recent, like I think the Crash Bandicoot remakes, but some where it's just like they just really this is a completely different game, like or you know what I mean, like that kind of attitude, which is also kind of interesting. But I guess what do we make of those different ways of approaching the recreation of media? I mean, movies do this too, right? Like remakes happen a lot in movies. They often end up completely remaking the movie a lot of the time.
Well, one of the things I was thinking about earlier when we were talking about, these kind of cultural products that kind of seem to be part of the zeitgeist and inspire, all of this sort of mod and work and all the rest. And I keep thinking about comic books, right? And comic books are a very good example of how something that seemed to capture that spirit and inspire multiple generations of new comic book artists, that so often you end up in the situation of essentially cultivating legends, right? You're telling myths again and again. That would be the next stage after something like this, right? There's the faithful re-articulation, but even as you say, in the end, the last third of this, we get a redone alien planet. Well, that starts to open the door to these, variations on a theme, and then there's the notion that there's one, official or correct telling of the tale starts to fall away, and in its place is this kind of multiplicity of all of that. That's what I would think of.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes to show as well that I think the great works of art that kind of inspire that kind of fervor are often done so for many different reasons. So for me, what inspires me about Half-Life, is like I love I'm a sucker for like what I would describe as kind of like aesthetics and like kind of like very well crafted experiences. Like I care less, like part of the reason why I actually now as an adult I had trouble getting back into WoW Classic, even though I loved it as a kid, was like I like the actual experience of like going in and doing the combat and stuff just wasn't what I mean, it had very little draw, very little way to keep my attention. Whereas like again, like for me, Half-Life is like yes, because like even playing it 22 years after its release, like the game design of these like corridors and like the pacing of the game and like the different kinds of encounters that the player has are all just like I can endlessly enjoyable to me, like right, like it's just like it's so well crafted. But I know a lot of people, for Half-Life is something else, right? Half-Life is they loved the expansions that came out or the modding of like playing the mods of the game, right? It was less about what Half-Life is and a lot more about what they did with the Half-Life software once they had it, right? Or for other people, maybe Half-Life is this complex story, right? That we were describing, this cultural product of like interesting characters that players can relate to, right? And the great ones, right? The great pieces of media, I think, often hit on those different levels, and that's why it's a nexus point, right? For a lot of different kinds of interpretations of what the game is. And what's interesting to me as somebody who's really interested in imagined communities is that how complicated those communities become when the reasons why the players are bound together or the community is bound together are so multiplicitous.
Exactly. Yes, I think that's very, very smart to put it that way, for sure. Yeah, from one angle, I was thinking about something earlier you said about the quality of the sort of game design. Less about the narrative and more about sort of the rhythm of the encounters and the sight lines and everything else about it. It reminds me of something we used to say about World of Warcraft back in the day in Burning Crusade era when Terra Nova was raiding it all the time. That, we love to run Karazhan. We ran Karazhan all the time. We just enjoyed it for itself. And we got to talking about it as kind of like our favorite golf course, right? And that led us to think about the fact that you can have a group of golfers, friends, who will play the same course, every weekend for the rest of their lives and never get bored, right? That sounds to me to be something like what you were describing about your experience of this game. But I think you're very smart to say, well, that's appealing to you, and other people may find that appealing too. But different groups of people may feel connected to it on other grounds, right? So that it really is a web of different kinds of significances and resonances that make something have that staying power.
Stuart asked if I want to dissertate on modders, and I said maybe, and he said anything with an interesting community. Yes, it has to. There's definitely community is like such an interesting thing to me now. Like but yeah, I totally agree with what you're just talking about. Like that, I think it's really important as scholars, because I think it can be tempting to and like we connect with game we're individuals, right? We're ACA fans, as Jenkins might describe it, right? We engage with the text on our own terms, but to understand that our terms are only a subset of all the terms that might engage with the text, and like trying to see it from those other perspectives, I think is really fruitful. It's a really good way to start looking at things. I was thinking just this week about Critical Role, right? They're the Twitch streaming, the biggest D&D streamers, and I was thinking about how they always showcase all the fan art of them. And now I'm not very artistically inclined in that way, but even if I was, I don't know if I would like spend my time like I play D&D. I'd rather draw my characters, right? Like than somebody else's. But somebody else, right? They engage that other person. They engage with it on a completely different level, right? Like they want to produce something, right? They want to engage with it in this artistic manner, right? That is different than the way that I want to. And to like understand that and ask questions of it, I think is a good direction.
It's a nice note to end on. Yeah,
it is. And it is 1:00. So thank you everyone in chat for joining us. This was excellent. We will be back not next week on Wednesday, but next week on Friday. We'll be hanging out again. Right now, no one's signed up, which means I might go again. Maybe I'll save from here, and maybe I'll just keep playing this game.
Well, I would enjoy it. I'd look forward to it. Thanks a lot, Eric.
All right, thanks. You guys have a great day.